Hey guys, Emily Muccianti here, and I am back with another video related to reading intervention. And today you're going to notice I'm standing, and that's for a very good reason. I had the pleasure of working with New York City school teachers this week. Thank you and shout out to my New York City school teachers who allowed me to come in and help you to develop your universal screener with Acadience. It was fantastic, but I've been sitting all day, so I need to do a little standing. Now, today we are going to take a look at the multi-tiered systems of support. We're going to look a little closer at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 instruction. And what does that mean, and how does intervention fit into all of this? Because we all have a little bit of different roles. Before we get in, I want to remind you to please like, subscribe, click the little notification bell so that you don't miss anything. And for goodness sakes, leave me a comment. I love to hear from you, so please do me the honor of just letting me know if this spoke to you, if it was helpful, or ask any questions so I can help from there. Okay, one other thing. If you have not yet joined our spring book club at readinglabsos.com, I invite you to join. We are going to be reading the 10 Success Factors for Literacy Intervention by Susan Hall, who is the co-founder of the 95% group. And so if you like her products and understand what she's all about, this book lays out how we in intervention can make sustainable intervention and change outcomes for students. So I invite you to do that. It is not too late. Our first meeting is going to be February 15th, which is 7 p.m. Eastern time. And this is the year 2022 in case this is still up there. Okay, but you might want to check out what other ones we have if it's in the future and past that. Okay, so that being said, let's talk about our tiers of instruction. You're all familiar with the pyramid, right? So we have a pyramid structure. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you what that actually looks like. So here you can see in the pyramid visual that kind of helps us to understand how this all works, how we are going to support our students at each of these different levels. Let me get my tool ready. And we can see that tier 1 is our core instruction. This is 100% of our students receive this instruction regardless of label, regardless of program placement. Everybody gets core instruction, okay? And then there are going to be some students, as you and I both know, that this is not enough. There are going to be some skill gaps, some lack of knowledge or information that is going to make accessing that core instruction very difficult. So this is where targeted small group instruction, and this is where the reading lab comes into place. Now, we might have some teachers, individual teachers performing small group instruction, which there might be a little bit of overlap here, whether we want to call that tier 1 instruction or we want to call it tier 2. If it's in the back of the room, small groups related to what that teacher is teaching. I'm not going to mix, and try to get caught up here on semantics. I want you to know that our tier 2 are the kids that need extra help, and particularly in literacy skills, okay? Early foundational literacy skills. We then have our tier 3 students, and at each school this might look a little bit different, but our tier 3 students they still receive core 1 instruction, okay? They may even get a little bit of tier 2 instruction, but they require more. And so we have to be able to differentiate between what are those tier 2 students getting versus what are our tier 3 students getting. And we can change a couple of things within these two parameters to increase the intensity. Let me give you an example. So our tier 2 kids, our kids in the reading lab, might be in groups of say 4 or 5. Okay, and the pacing of the instruction that is related to foundational skills that is matched based on assessed data is somewhat slower than a core instruction pace or a tier 1 pace, but can go at a pacing that's a little bit faster than a tier 3 instruction. So tier 3, we can change the intensity, we can change the pacing, and we can change the group size. So perhaps tier 3 requires it's one teacher to 2 students or one-on-one, but we're going to shrink the amount of students in the group. It removes some of the distraction. It allows the teacher to tightly fit that 1, 2, or 3 students together so that they're really focusing on specific needs. And we can adjust the pacing so that a student can spend more time on those skills that they need. So those are some of the things. How do we change the intensity? Well, it may be that we're doing additional practice. It may be the type of curriculum we're using. It is just some sort of a change. So let me take you back here to core instruction, tier 1 instruction. I get asked this a lot, like, okay, I'm an interventionist. What about tier 1 instruction? And let me be very, very clear. Tier 1 instruction is the most important instruction. It just is. 100% of our students receive it, and we need to take our school resources and make sure that teachers are supported with great instructional techniques so that they are still utilizing explicit, direct, systematic instruction at the tier 1 level. Because with really good tier 1 instruction, we're actually limiting the amount of kids that will be needing tier 2 and even tier 3 instruction. So let's be real. You guys know I love Anita Archer. Anita Archer once said, you cannot intervene your way out of a tier 1 core instruction problem. So if the kids are not getting good tier 1 instruction and you have got 50% of your school population needing intervention, that is not an intervention problem. That is a core instruction problem, okay? But as interventionists, there are some things we can do. The first thing is we're looking at our universal screeners to make sure that we can pull these numbers and see what it is, where those numbers are falling, okay? So with that said, we have to focus our time on tier 1 core instruction. And that's what I'd like to go a little bit deeper with you today. So let me stop sharing that, bring you back to me. There I am. Let me review my notes real quick. Okay, so why is tier 1 instruction so important? Well, it's so important for a couple of reasons. First, 100% of our students attend tier 1 instruction, right? We have a role as interventionists to support tier 1 instruction. Now, depending on what the model looks like in your school, you may also be in a coaching position or some sort of a leadership role where you have a little more say and influence and impact in what's happening in core instruction tier 1, which is great. If that is not happening in your position, we need to talk. Because you really are this quasi coach / mentor / admin. It's a crazy position. And we as interventionists need to make sure that our tier 1 levels of teachers have what they need and that they're giving good instruction. Now, if you have an overabundance of kids hitting those other tiers of intervention, okay, tier 2 and tier 3, and you have a stack of special ed referrals and assessment plans because kids were not getting the best instruction at each of those levels, we really have to go back and start with core instruction, okay? That's the first thing. So how can intervention help with this? Well, here's the first thing. We start by our intervention or our reading labs are the teams that are taking the universal screeners, preferably. That is, and it may look a little different at your school, and that's okay. But we start with data, okay? We always start with data. And when we can look at data, if we see across the board gaps, or there are such a large percentage of students that are missing certain skills, then we need to have a conversation with our grade levels that are pretty much either responsible for or it's developmentally appropriate for the student to receive those skills in that particular grade level. Let me give you an example. So a number of years ago, I came into an elementary school and we completed our universal screening. We had had some data in the past from the previous person, and so we had some longitudinal data, which was fantastic. And as I was starting to look at this, the analysis of the data, what I noticed was that our kids were doing really well in some of the nonsense word fluency assessments, and the letter naming and even the oral reading fluency. But the phonemic awareness, the initial sounds, we do it's a first sound fluency or an initial sound fluency assessment. And the number of kids that were lacking that skill was profound. Like it was more than 50% of the school population, right? Clearly too many kids for intervention. So looking at this data, talking with my team, my admin, all of this, we came up with a plan that this was something that was appropriate to then ask it was kinder and first grade teachers at the time to support, okay? Because that's where that skill's really developing, kindergarten and first grade. So phonemic awareness was just lacking. Our curriculum didn't have a strong tie to it at the time, so the kids weren't getting it there. I think really there was a misunderstanding of the importance of phonemic awareness, and so teachers were kind of missing it. Well-intentioned although they were, but it was causing us some gaps down the road. So that's what we did. So we purchased Heggerty for all of our K-1 teachers, and I trained and did some demonstrations and went in to support those teachers. We did some after-school trainings to make sure that our teachers, first of all, understood why that is such a predictive indicator. Okay, it is a predictive indicator of future reading success, and they needed to understand why. Because when you don't understand why, you're like, why do I need to do this, right? So I had to make the connection about that. Why was that so important? We then had to invest in them and give them the curriculum, which we did, and we then had to provide them with training, right? We can't just throw books and curriculum at our teachers and say, here. They have to know why. They have to be invested in, and they have to have the training. So we provided all of that, went back, instituted it there in our Tier 1 instruction, kept it in Tier 2 because we had kids that were critically behind in that area, and we were double dipping them in that skill. And Tier 3, again, had it even more so at a very slow pace and a lot of repetitions. The growth was amazing because we did not try to have intervention fill this gaping hole. We recognized that the hole was there and pulled our resources. This was not a blame game. This wasn't anything other than, okay, guys, we know this skill is important. We know it's lacking in almost half of our kids. What are we going to do about it? And we invested and trained and gave them the time to do that. And we saw the results. So that is a beautiful way to make sure that our Tier 1 instruction is receiving our support as interventionists, because we have the data at our fingertips, right? And you should be sharing this data. I go back and forth. I don't know why, but I do. Anywho, you should be sharing this with your sites, with your teachers. They want to know. The vast majority of them want to know and want to know how to make their outcomes better for their students. And so if you're just collecting data and nobody's seeing it, then that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. So get it out there. Show what you're going to do so that those lines between your Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 somewhat blur. There is some overlap so that those kids that need more can have more in order to get better. Okay. I think I was pretty clear on that. All right. So the other thing, if you have students that are receiving tier 2 and tier 3 intervention, and I've done that myself. Sometimes tier 3 students, they are, maybe they're SPED identified, maybe they're not. I always took my afternoons. I would have like this window of 30 minutes or so. And because I always got new kids that came into the district and just skills were completely gone. And that was my time for that kid to perform tier 3 intervention, either one-on-one or no more than 3 in a group. And that's what we did. But I also had them in the reading lab. Why? Because sitting in their tier 1 instruction class where they had no clue wasn't doing them any good at that time. One of the benefits of looking at this tiered system and making sure that there are these connections between your tiers is when we give students what they need, we start to see improvements. And when we can do that, our RTI models are strong and your special ed referrals will go down. Wouldn't we love that? Our special ed referrals go down because we've given the best instruction at every single tier. By the time they get to that tier 3, if they are not progressing, then they really need special education. There needs to be something different. But we have exhausted all of those other intervention options for that student. So there you have it. The importance of tier 1. Please remember, support your tier 1 teachers. Make sure that you are a safe place. Start with the willing. Have these conversations. Invite them into your room. Share articles with them that you think might be helpful, and keep the conversation open. Pretty soon what you're going to find is that you are a go-to person for your teachers, and that is what you want. If your teachers come to you seeking advice, they value and respect what you have to say because they know that you're going to help them. And when you help your teachers, think of all of those kids that you have indirectly affected and helped. And that's why we do this. We are all a part of the same team. Thank you for doing what you're doing. From my heart to yours, because I know you have a heart of gold. I invite you again to join me at readinglabsos.com. We also have a Facebook group. I would love for you, one more time, one more plug, if you're with me this long. I would love for you to be with me this long. Join my spring book club. Okay, this one goes from, we're going to meet in February, March, and April of 2022. And then at that time, we will look for our summer book so that we can keep doing. These are free book clubs. I would love for you to join because the goal is to make sure that we are doing best practices for our students. All right. Thank you again. Much love to you. Mwah. Bye for now.